Hello there, Brick Fanatics. Here's an interesting question for you. How do you improve upon perfection? It's a challenge that I think the Lego designers behind the Lego Mona Lisa have been struggling with, because on the one hand, they are attempting to recreate one of the most iconic pieces of art in all of history in Lego form. And I've got to say, the brick is not entirely suited to the specific fine details that make the Mona Lisa such a special portrait. But also, the Lego designers behind this thing have been attempting to follow up Hokusai's Great Wave, which personally is my very favourite Lego set of all time. The question is, how well can you improve upon perfection when you've already got there? That is the big challenge, and I've got to say, this thing does not quite succeed. Indeed, I would say that the Lego designers behind this set themselves are aware that they've not entirely nailed the Mona Lisa because of some particularly interesting pieces that are included in the box. That said, I do think that this is an absolutely fantastic Lego set in its own right, and if you're able to overlook the more noticeable flaws within the set, then you are going to have an absolutely brilliant time with this. So first things first, by the way, as with other sets in the Lego art theme, this has got a funky little nail hook here, but it's 2024, nobody uses nails anymore, so I've got some command strips. Nice having the camera here, because it can help me just line that up. Well, that doesn't look right. This is the kind of job that needs a level thingy, but I don't have a level thingy. Ah! Should have used a nail. The command strips are not sticking. That's... Whoa, okay. Alright, well, it'll just stay there for this review. Oh dear. Need some better command strips. Right, anyway, there is one very obvious flaw with the Mona Lisa in Lego form, and you will have noticed it the moment that you first spotted the Lego set. It's the face. The face is... it's not great, let's be perfectly honest here, and I don't think anybody is going to necessarily quibble that, even the Lego designers that worked on the set. It's an imperfect solution to trying to recreate the majesty, the detail, the fine nuance that you see in the original Mona Lisa. Da Vinci's Mona Lisa is an absolutely spectacular piece of art, specifically because of the level of detail and the level of what we would now call photorealism that you get from this portrait. It is something that captures a woman from several hundred years ago, several hundred years before the camera was invented, in such exquisite detail, and yet at the same time her facial expression is nuanced, it is ambiguous, you cannot quite get your hand on what she's exactly trying to express here, where what she was probably trying to express was, I'm really uncomfortable because I've had to sit still for several hours. We get that wonderful Mona Lisa smile. Is she smiling? Is she maybe not quite as happy as she seems? It's something that a lot of people have spent a lot of time trying to puzzle out, and that's one of the brilliant things about the piece that has made it stick in the public consciousness for centuries at this point. And when you try and recreate that level of fine detail and that nuance and that subtlety in Lego form, you realise that Lego doesn't do nuance and subtlety particularly well. Yes, an individual tiny Lego stud seems like a small thing, but when it comes to all of these Lego art pieces, we see how the Lego designers have had to work around the fact that these tiny little dots are still not tiny enough to give us the kind of detail that we see in a lot of fine art pictures. So if you look at Van Gogh's Starry Night, for example, there are some elements where, in order to try and create the finer lines of brushstrokes, large chunks of the build are turned sideways so that we use the sides of the Lego bricks rather than the tops of them. Here with Hokusai's Great Wave, we've got a few elements that are printed, and then we've got a few elements that are instead recreated with birds, which give us a little bit of the contours and the shapes and of the hooks and the crashing of the waves that we otherwise wouldn't be able to get in brick form. And with the Mona Lisa, the thing that really needs that fine level of detail is the smile and the eyes, and that just cannot be achieved anyway other than going with these printed pieces, and they don't look perfect. I think one of the the more controversial elements of this build is the fact that the designers have gone with trying to recreate this thing as photorealistically as possible, where they could have gone a little more stylized. They could have gone, for example, with the standard minifigure face of 2 dots and a smile, which kind of would give you that same level of ambiguity, because that's kind of the point of a Lego minifigure face, is it's meant to be a whole range of different emotions simplified down to its core essence, so that you can look at it and just say, oh, that minifigure has got whatever face. It doesn't really matter. And I think it being such an iconic face, it would work as a fun joke for this set, in a way that this face, it doesn't feel like it wants to joke. It doesn't feel like it wants to be taken lightly. This wants to be entirely serious, and as a result just comes across feeling a little bit uncanny valley. I'm going to spare you a longer and larger lesson on art theory, but I do just want to very briefly mention a wonderful book called Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, which I think I may have mentioned on this channel before, which talks about the difference between a very photorealistic portrait of a person versus something very, very simple like a Lego minifigure face, where the more detail you have there, the less ambiguity there is normally, and the less a person can project their own emotions onto it. It works very similar to Jaws and the shark. The less you see of the shark, the scarier the shark is, because your brain fills in the gaps. And with a Lego minifigure face, it's the same. When things are very, very simple, that face can be absolutely anyone, but when you start putting more details on, it becomes a very specific person. So if the Lego designers here had gone with a more generic, straightforward minifigure face, then the flaws that we see with this particular version of the Mona Lisa would be less apparent. And the Lego designers know that, because if you get to the very end of the build, you discover that they have planned around this. They have mitigated for people who just don't like this particular printed face. Spoilers, by the way, if you're the kind of person that doesn't like to have a Lego set spoiled, and given that this is almost entirely absent from the marketing for this set, I can understand if you just don't want to know this. If that's the case, skip ahead maybe 30 seconds to a minute. I'll put time codes so that you're able to do it very nice and quickly. Here we go. The very last bag, it says you can either use the printed tiles or you can use these blank ones. It's up to you. It's essentially the Lego designers admitting, yeah, not everybody's gonna love this, and that's fair enough if that's you. Then you can just use the blank ones and allow your imagination to fill in the gaps and make this thing look a little bit better. I did that first off. I put on the blank tiles because I'd not seen any evidence of this, any images of this on the internet at the time of making this review. And I have to say, I do think it works a little bit better in some ways. It's not perfect still, because it lacks then something that you would get from the Mona Lisa in person, but at the same time it does just feel a little bit less uncomfortable if you're looking at this too much and thinking, oh, that is a bit too uncanny valley. I should point out though that in order to put these tiles on now, in order to swap out the blank ones, I thought it was going to be a fairly straightforward process. I thought, oh, I'll just pop them off and put the next ones on. No, because they're a bit buried under various different layers of things, and because they fit in so snugly, I did need to dismantle a whole lot more of her face than I thought I needed to. Anyway, that's enough talk about the face, because while that's the thing that's going to grab you first, that is not the detail of this that I find the most enjoyable. And it's, in fact, the last thing that you actually put together in the build. You start with this gorgeous gold frame filled up with drum-lacquered gold pieces, which just look absolutely incredible. And then you build the initial background of the set before building Mona Lisa herself, who juts out just a little bit. It's not quite as pronounced as with the Great Wave, but it is just, it's there enough that you can feel a separation of the foreground and the background. The background itself is delightful. One of the drawbacks of the drum-lacquered gold pieces is that they cast a reflection over the set, which I find quite fun, because as with the Great Wave, the Lego designers here have gone for not what Mona Lisa looks like right now, which is various shades of brown because of the weathering and just the effects of fading over time, but they've gone for more vibrant colours that would more closely match the original colours for Mona Lisa. And so that means a wonderful blue background. They're using light aqua here, which then transitions down into various greys. So there's not a lot of brown used in the background. But because of the light that's cast by the drum lacquer gold frame, you end up with an awful lot more brown on here than you would expect. Like if you look at these pieces in isolation, you'll think to yourself, oh, those are quite bright colours that they've chosen. But then because of the shade of the whole set together, you end up looking at the whole piece and you think, oh, that's more brown than I thought when I was looking at just the elements by themselves. In practice, it means that this is a Lego set which, if you just look at the whole of it, you get one impression. But when you get up close and you start looking at the finer details, it comes alive in a way that you just cannot get from a photograph, which is very fitting because that's what a lot of people say about Mona Lisa herself, and it's why so many people flock to Lourdes every year to be able to see the original painting. Beyond that, you've got the wonderful detail on the hands, and where the face might not be absolutely perfect, the hands are just a delight to put together. It's so inventive and you can really see it coming together and just really enjoy the experience of clicking all of those pieces together and discovering that you've made hands. And it's funny because faces and hands, as we generally know, are the two things that fall into the uncanny valley the easiest. There's a reason why AI struggles so much to recreate hands and, to a certain degree, the light behind the eyes in people's faces when an AI is trying to make a portrait. And that is because hands are really difficult to get right because they're very detailed, they've got a lot of moving parts, and we look at them all day, every day, so we are very well aware of what a hand looks like and what doesn't look right if a picture of a hand is not quite proportioned correctly. So the fact that these hands work this well is a testament to just how talented the Lego art team are. You see what I'm saying, right? Where the face catches your eye initially because of course it does, that's what faces do. But then as you look at the other details, you realize just how inventive and clever the entire set is. One thing I did want to point out, like previous Lego art sets, this one has got a soundtrack/podcast that you can listen to as you build. It's actually very cleverly broken up into chapters, so as you get to each bag you scan, or each stage of the build, you scan a QR code and you get another little chunk of that podcast. Unfortunately, I've not been able to review that because the Lego group doesn't love to put these things on their website too far in advance of the retail release of a set. But just knowing that it is there makes me happy because I really enjoyed the one for the Hokusai Great Wave, and I'm hoping that the same level of quality is achieved again, because why wouldn't it be? If there's another downside to the set, and this is really nitpicking, but I do feel like I want to mention it, I feel like as a picture, the Great Wave is far more dynamic and far more interesting to look at. Like, obviously, the original Mona Lisa is a joy to behold, and that level of detail is really stunning, and there's a reason why so many people want to see it, but in Lego form, a lot of that is lost, whereas I feel like a lot of the energy of the Great Wave from Hokusai's original print has been carried across into Lego form. What's more, I feel like the Lego version of this has a degree of artistic message to it that you don't get with the Mona Lisa. Particularly the way that they use these screen tone or half-tone dots in the background in order to give that sense of depth, but then also means that this kind of has connotations and reminds you of comic art. Now, the Great Wave itself, as I learned from listening to that soundtrack podcast, is not a single picture. It's not a painting. It is a print. It was mass-produced. It was low art to a certain degree that was sold to the masses for very cheap. People would buy these things, which are essentially posters, and put them up on their walls, and so that's why there are so many different copies of the Great Wave around the world in various museums, because there is no one original. It was mass-produced art in much the same way that comic books are mass-produced art and are normally considered low art unless someone like Roy Lichtenstein gets hold of them and makes them into pop art by recreating panels from comics in painting form and then selling them for millions, with essentially the message of this low art can be high art if you put it in a museum. And I feel the same vibe from this, because this is a mass-produced Lego set, a construction kit, which recreates a very famous painting in a way that reminds you of that legacy of art that is mass-produced for everybody. There's not that same, I think, level of subtle message that I get from the Great Wave, where it connects to that history of comics as well as that history history of the painting itself. There's nothing that really stands out artistically to me from the Mona Lisa, and maybe there are people out there who are more talented at analysing art that will be able to give you a greater, more in-depth look at what this Mona Lisa in Lego form stands for, but personally it's not something that really counts against this picture. It's just another way that I absolutely love the Hokusai one, and so I was always going to have a hard time coming to a second or an additional fine art recreation in Lego form and actually feel like it lives up to the standards set by the Great Wave. That is more or less where I'm at with this new set. It's not perfect, and it's not got quite the dynamism and the message and the meaning that I have had from previous Lego art sets. But at the same time, I genuinely enjoyed putting it together. It surprised me, because I went into this thinking, oh, well, it doesn't look quite as nice. Is it really going to be all that good? And then as I'm putting it together, I remembered, oh, I actually really like putting together Lego art sets. There is something therapeutic about it, and the slightly different way that the techniques are put together, which just means that you can allow it to wash over you to a certain degree and not really have to think too much about what you're doing so that your mind can wander. You can listen to the podcast if you want to, or you can, in my case, put on some AC/DC, I think, and just kind of chill out for a while. It's a good set. I recommend it, genuinely. I don't think that you're going to get quite as much out of it as you may do from, say, Starry Night or from Hokusai the Great Wave, but at the same time, it's wonderful in and of its own right. And if you're able to overcome or overlook the slight ways in which it is imperfect, in the same way that all art is in some way imperfect, because nothing is a perfect piece of art, really, then you are going to have a really good time with this, and you are going to enjoy having it on display. And because it is Lego, there is room here for customization beyond just the customization that comes within the box. See, from the first moment I saw this set, I thought to myself, it is very serious. It is not to be taken lightly, and that doesn't quite gel with the way that I normally like to approach Lego, where I like something to have a little bit of whimsy and fun and charm to it. And that being the case, I thought to myself, how could this be improved? Googly eyes, right? Like, swap out these printed tiles for larger, bigger, funnier eyes. And I just happen to have the perfect accompaniment to this set. All right, let's get in here. Big old googly eyes. Let's pop them on. All right, you ready for this? There we go, look at that. Is that not immediately better? Just so much more fun and silly and goofy, and that is absolutely the way that I'm going to be displaying this thing. There you go, I've fixed it. It was just that easy. You're welcome, Lego art team. Who are probably crying as they look at this. So in summary, I think that this is an absolutely brilliant set. I'm aware that it has its flaws and that it is not entirely perfect, and it's maybe not quite as strong as previous Lego art sets that have attempted to recreate iconic pieces from artistic history, but I do think that it is genuinely enjoyable, and with a few little improvements it can be made all the more fun and silly, which is just joyful. Make sure that if you are going to be picking up this set or any other Lego set in the near future, that you use the QR code that is currently on screen or the affiliate link which is down in the description. It takes you straight to the Lego website. We get a little bit of the percentage of the sale when you purchase things through that link. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it helps to keep the lights on at Brick Fanatics. Make sure that you also do all of the regular YouTube things. Give this video a thumbs up and hit subscribe and the notification bell. Let us know your thoughts on Lego Mona Lisa down in the comments below, and make sure that you go to brickfanatics.com for all of your Lego news and reviews, and sign up to our newsletter so that you never miss anything Lego related ever again. Thank you very much for watching, and here's hoping that we get more brilliant Lego art recreations in the future.